Yes.
Something.
Yes.
Do you want me to introduce you, or?
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
Sorry we have to start a little early. I'm Congressman Mike Quigley from Chicago. I'm with Darrell Issa from California. We have to go vote immediately, so I want a chance to thank everyone for being here and for our panelists who will be here today for all their efforts and the ongoing progress that I think we're making. I want to thank Congressman Issa for his extraordinary work helping us move forward, Transparency Caucus, and the ongoing issues. It is near and dear to me, as I mention often. 2 of the last 4 members of my seat are in jail or went to jail. 3 of the last 5 governors are in jail or went to jail.
So that's why you're staying in the house.
One of them is, and it's bad when you hear corruption jokes from guys from Jersey and Louisiana about Illinois. We've had some progress, and I want to thank Darrell for his work on this. Digital Accountability and Transparency Act passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. The nation's first legislative mandate for data transparency. A few months ago, the long-stalled reform of the Freedom of Information Act was signed into law. There is obviously much, much more to do, as you will discuss. We are going to get some progress on publishing CRS reports, and there'll be news on that pretty soon. We do believe that there ought to be cameras in the Supreme Court as another example. What's all too apparent, only a couple hundred people can get in the Supreme Court and watch decisions by what can be as few as, I guess, 4 or 5 strike-down laws made by 435 members of the House and 100 senators and the President of the United States. So these are just a few of the steps of where we should go. I'm a firm believer that the real cost of corruption is the loss of the public's trust. And I have witnessed now for 34 years in Chicago politics and Illinois politics, it has made it more difficult for lawmakers to make tough decisions. If people are questioning the basis for your decisions, why you're making these decisions, it's going to make those choices even more difficult than they already are. So our task should be to make this business as transparent, accountable to the American public as we possibly can. And because we're rushed, I want to bring on my colleague who has helped us move this caucus together, Darrell Issa.
Thanks, Mike, and I'll be equally brief, not just because there's a vote, but also because from a standpoint of the future, you've got 2 people who've been working together since Mike came to Congress. Before all those indictments, you were on the right side. The reality for us is that it's a bipartisan movement. It's a movement about not trusting either party, not trusting the bureaucrats, and it does bring the left and the right together. However, we had decades of talking about it before we got movement. With FOIA reform, with the Data Act, actually even with some of the procurement reforms that have made those processes more transparent, we've made progress. So in the 115th Congress, the most important goal is to make sure that we not get in the habit of saying, well, we're going to do a big bill every 10 years or 15 years, but rather there's more to do on FOIA. Implementation of the Data Act needs a lot of work. There is excitement and real contribution in this administration. We have to make sure immediately that the next administration picks up where this one left off, because quite candidly, this is not one of those things where they got a law and they didn't like it. They got a law and they're working to implement it. We need to make sure that continues. Last but not least, the committee that we both served on controlled the question of whistleblowers and the ability of Congress to learn. We need to do a lot more on that. The last whistleblower bill took decades to get through. We all celebrated it, and it completely ignored the clandestine service. It ignored somebody, let's say in the CIA, getting to somebody in any part of Congress and actually blowing the whistle. So for those of us who would like to see Snowden given an award, but getting the award in prison, I think what we have to do is we have to find legal ways for people to report anything, including things which have to be kept classified, but report them so that they not have to show up in the New York Times. So that's an area, on top of everything Mike said, where you have strong bipartisan support, and assuming the voters continue to ignore our records and return the two of us, we'll be back next Congress trying to pick up in those areas more. So thank you, keep the faith through this panel, and we'll see you in January on the next step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Understood.
Now, conspire against us once we leave.
Yes,
Okay?
well,
We're
count on
gonna
that.
make them do more than they promised.
So, and as they walk out, as we're getting our panelists together, you know, it may seem like an unlikely alliance, but Congressman Issa and Quigley really have done yeoman's work on a number of these issues, from making sure that we have bulk access to legislative data, which is something that Congressman Issa pushed through despite some reluctance on leadership part, to Mr. Quigley asking questions during appropriations hearings, to folks over at OMB who didn't necessarily like the idea of making the lobbying that was happening inside the administration transparent. These are folks who are willing to do what they think is right and reach across the aisle and work together, which is not something that we see as often as we would like in Congress. And the fact that this partnership has endured, I think this is 6 years on now. I mean, it seems like that.
Time flies.
I mean, that's really remarkable. So, it's, I would have said even nicer things were in the room in the hopes of getting something in place myself. But at least for now, it's worth acknowledging, the good work that they've done and the other members of the Congressional Transparency Caucus. And for that, our panelists are here, so I will start introducing them. So to my immediate, and I should say this is being recorded, it's not live streamed, but it will be up on YouTube later. So to my immediate right is Shanna Devine. She works for the Government Accountability Project on whistleblower issues. And I don't remember your title, but she seems to do just about everything. Next to her is Patrice McDermott. Patrice is the Executive Director of OpenTheGovernment.org, and the .org is indeed in the title of the organization, which acts as an umbrella organization for a lot of the openness and transparency work that we do. And Christian, I'm sorry, would you say your last name for me, please?
Hayner, like Boehner, yes.
So Christian Hayner is works at the Data Coalition, and also, what's the nonprofit side?
Data Foundation.
The Data Foundation, doing a tremendous amount of work related to the Data Act. So these are our panelists. So the way we're going to go forward today is we've got a couple issues that we're going to talk about that have made real progress in the last Congress or two. So before the Data Act and whistleblowing, which is what you heard the Congressman mention. And then we're going to pivot a bit, and we're going to look to what should be happening in the 115th Congress. And once we do those things, we'll take questions from the audience, assuming that we haven't run out of time. And my goal is to make sure that we have enough time to do that. So maybe let's start with the oldest of the recent successes, which is the Data Act.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what's happened, what it is, and what's coming up with it?
Surely. So I'm Christian Hayner with the Data Coalition. We would like to say we're the nation's only trade association specifically focused on encouraging the public sector to switch from a documents and form-based approach to collecting and storing information over to a data-centric model. So we like to see common ontologies across the government, as well as consistent data standards for the information we work with. So we were one of the forces behind the passage of the 2014 Digital Accountability and Transparency Act, which really provides a consistent, reliable, and useful online data format for federal taxpayer dollars. So a little bit about the history and the context. I guess back 10 minutes or so. So there's like three conflicting kind of federal financial reporting regimes. So you have a historical cash-based kind of model based on appropriations. Then in the 1990s with the CFO Act, that kind of imposed an accrual-based accounting structure on the government. Kind of different systems were developed that didn't really talk to the former. And then finally, with the stimulus funds, we wanted to see where the money ended up, so we had a reward-based structure there. The Data Act creates federal-wide accounting data standards that cut through all those systems and allow you to compare agency to agency. So what does it do? It amends the Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act of 2006 and requires Treasury and the OMB to get together and create a consistent data structure for the financial side information as well as the award side information. and then links those data sets together. So that's kind of the first time we're going to be able to track the accounting and see where those accounts end up in actual spending, so contracts and grants. And then it also establishes pilot projects that want to standardize how agencies and the Treasury Department collects information from grantees and contractors. So when you receive a federal award, taxpayer-funded dollars, you have to report how you're spending that information or that money. And there's a pilot project that OMB set up at HHS, and they're looking at grants, and they've assembled 600 forms from across the government. That's about 11,000 separate data elements being reported just by grantees. Initial pass, they've kind of seen the 26% redundancy in those data elements. So that gives you kind of a sense of the universe of information we're working with out there. So we hope to see TurboTax-like systems be developed that help make that relationship with the government more intuitive. So grantees don't spend their time reporting, but they can spend their time doing.
And this was initially talked about, it was Coburn and Obama who started with this, right? They had a bill when Obama was senator. And Coburn used to talk about this as Google for government, which didn't make a ton of sense, but it was basically the idea to being able to follow spending all the way through the process. Could you talk just a little bit about where the implementation is inside OMB and Treasury and what we can expect to see in the next 6 months or a year?
Yep, so this year, Treasury came out with their schema, so the data elements that all the agencies are required to report on. And agencies are in the midst of working with Treasury to figure out a way to pull together 7 different data files, 3 of which are owned and utilized by the agency, 4 are kind of relying on legacy outside systems, and match those together into the new data structure. So that implementation deadline is May 2017 for the agencies to begin reporting. The GAO and House Oversight are watching that process really closely, as is Senator Warner, requesting information on where the agencies stand. The bad news on that side is that it doesn't look like OMB is taking a leadership role in proactively going to agencies and telling them that they must comply with the law on that
You might
front.
be better off than not.
And just for a point of historical context, OMB had opposed the Data Act and worked significantly to undermine it during the process of working through the legislative process and enacting it. Although they have announced that they are committed to the legislation, although as you can see, there may be some doubts that remain in terms of what that commitment will be. I want to come back to the Data Act.
Sure.
I just want to, I'll do top level and we can dig in.
Sure.
So Patrice, can you talk a little bit about FOIA?
Sure, so you want me to first talk about what's in it and why it's good, and then
Yes.
talk about what remains to be
Yes,
done?
please.
Okay, so as most of you know, and I know a few of you in the room absolutely know, a new amendment to the Freedom of Information Act passed both Congresses finally, or both houses finally, in June of this year, and was signed into law by the President at the very end of June, just before the 4th of July 50th anniversary of the Freedom of Information Act. And this took several years to get passed, and a lot of give and take. More give on the House side than on the Senate side. But so some of the provisions that it includes, there's some that our community thinks are particularly important, the openness community. One of them is codifying the presumption of openness for future administrations. So some of you have been around long enough to remember that Janet Reno created a presumption of openness. It was overturned by Ashcroft. It was reinstated in the Obama administration by the President and Attorney General Holder. And it's come and gone. And so we in Congress thought that it was important to put this into law so that the public knew, journalists knew, and the government knew that this was not going to go away. They couldn't sit on their hands and wait for it to disappear, as they do with many things that they don't like. So that was a very important change. It sounds minimal because you think agencies are doing that, but they're not. They didn't do it under Reno, and they didn't change it back under Ashcroft. So now it's in the law. The second big one, is harnessing technology to improve the FOIA process, and this will be a portal. The idea behind it being that requesters can go one place and submit their request, and it will be sent to the appropriate agency, and that, as Melanie Postay in the Office of Information Policy likes to say, it'll be like a pizza at whichever pizza company it is. You can follow its progress as it goes through the oven and gets baked. But you can also follow it as it gets blocked in an agency, and you know where it is and whose desk it's on. You can follow it. This is the idea, the implementation. The idea is also that you can, if it's referred to another agency who has equities, who has an interest in the information in it and might not want that information shared, you can see who it's referred to, when it was referred to them, and then where in the process it is there. You'll have contact information at every point, in theory, and at the end, the idea is that at some point after its release, it will be put up on the site, on the portal, for anyone to have access to. I say at some point after its release because this is a concern for researchers and for journalists, that information that they have struggled hard to get might be given to their competitors at the same time. My response has always been, you're bestowing more efficiency on government than they're capable of. But the reality is that that is concerned. So there's a process of negotiation going on about how long a delay there might be. And of course, there's a question about how, in what format it will be put up. If it's put up in a non-readable PDF, that's not nearly as useful as something that can be actually used. Limiting to a period of 25 years the ability of agencies to keep internal deliberations confidential. This is not attorney-client privilege. This is the deliberative process privilege. We fought for 12 years, which is what presidential records have. There was enormous pushback in the Senate on that, and so we compromised on 25 years. But what this means is that the records of the Bay of Pigs invasion are now not considered protected internal deliberations anymore. They might be withheld for other reasons. Some of it may still be classified, but they're not internal deliberations that can be protected any longer. And then increasing the effectiveness of the FOIA by strengthening the Office of Government Information Services, also known as OGIS, which is the arbitration, mediation, really not arbitration body on FOIA, and is now authorized by the bill to do compliance auditing and to report directly to Congress their findings without having to go through the White House and through OIP and other agencies to get permission to report to Congress. So those are the big ones for me. There are other people in the audience and at this table may have other ones that they think are important. So do I have time to talk about what's next? Okay. So there's a number of things, and as Daniel said, we're a umbrella, but we are a coalition of 90 groups, and then we work very closely with a lot of groups here in DC. And our community came together in July to talk about next steps on this and on a broader openness agenda. And some of the things that we really want to look at, and we know that the House leadership wants, or of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee staff want to look at, are OLC opinions. We are encouraging, and there's encouraging all around, for them to have hearings on these to investigate both the number, the actual number of final OLC opinions, and provide greater access to the opinions for Congress and the public. There's some dispute that ties into this about attorney-client relations inside the government, and is OLC an attorney for the White House, when they give advice for the White House, are they acting as the White House's attorney? We say no, the White House has an attorney, thank you very much. They say yes. There's also considerations of when agency attorneys give opinions to their agencies, they're actually very worried about those coming back to bite them when they're considered for a judgeship or something. And they're not necessarily their personal opinions, their advice they gave to the agency. So there are things to be worked out, and there's a need for hearings, and there's a need for briefings, and there's a need for discussion of these issues to move down the road. But everyone in both chambers with oversight of FOIA is very concerned to get more disclosure of OLC opinions and to parse out this attorney-client issue and to see where there's room for movement on that. To limit the use of certain FOIA exemptions, so things like exemption 8, just privacy, which we see used extensively. Agencies are redacting the name of their FOIA officer out of privacy. I think that's right, no?
That's right.
At least at the council. I'm getting skeptical looks from, what are they redacting? Oh, no, I'm doing from memory, so.
Yeah, that is still happening.
Yeah.
There's still not a point of FOIA contact at every single
Right.
one of them.
Right.
And Congress did not see fit to mandate.
Right. And exemption 4, which is confidential business information, is also a big concern. There's a number of different ways of going at that. Different agencies have different ways of going at it, requiring certification by the submitter. So and it's overused. Privacy exemption, exemption 6 has grown, and it needs to be framed in a way that protects personal privacy, but doesn't protect the work of government and government officials from scrutiny. Non-custodial search and consultation processes. The House had language about this, and there's a need to limit the consultations that agency people do on with individuals and other agencies, particularly on FOIA requests, and that it leads to unending delays. So the House bill included a provision that would have established procedures, including deadlines. The Senate bill didn't, and where we went forward to passage was with the Senate bill. So there need to be oversight hearings. We would say oversight hearings on, I'm trying to think, regular ones instead of the once annual. We would like to have oversight hearings on how agencies are given guidance by the Department of Justice. We'd like to have oversight hearings on the choices of litigation, which we will never get, but we can keep asking. And also, learning more about how agencies understand the law, how they actually understand the law as opposed to what OIP says in their guidance to them. So there are a range of issues that could be addressed in hearings. They should address the role of the new FOIA officers, oversight of OIP and OIP oversight or lack thereof of the agencies, FOIA regulations. Agencies now have 180 days to implement new FOIA regulations. We're very concerned either that they won't meet it or that they will and will not reflect changes in the law or will only reflect changes as recommended by OIP. Again, OLC opinions and attorney-client privilege. So I'm going to stop there.
So, thank you, Regis.
Yeah.
When we come back, I want you to talk about E3s.
Oh, yes.
But we won't do that now.
No, okay.
And
Yes.
equation, the same thing. I want you to be thinking about application of the Data Act to Congress to pull that into the underlying data structure.
Mm.
But I want to turn to Shanna to
Right.
talk about what's going on with whistleblowers. There seems to be a little bit in the news of late, so maybe you can
Sure.
talk a little bit about what's been going on legislatively and regulatory and otherwise.
I can do a brief little recap of what's happened over the past few years, if that would be helpful, just to give folks an idea of where we are. And it's pretty exciting. First, I should thank you, Daniel, for organizing this panel, and
Yes.
to the Transparency Caucus for holding it as well.
You're the polite one.
And in thanking the Transparency Caucus, in particular, Congressman Issa, because he played a very significant role on passage of the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act that he discussed. And that's the primary federal whistleblower law, or amendments to the primary federal whistleblower law, the Whistleblower Protection Act. And that happened in 2012, and I'll go into it a little bit more, but I just want to acknowledge his role in that, and the fact that once that law was finally passed, it did not include protections for intelligence community employees. Earlier iterations of it did. Yes.
So what did it not include?
The final law did not include protections for intelligence community employees. So you have the right as an intelligence community employee to blow the whistle, but you do not have protections against retaliation in the process. Now, there has been an exception to that, and initial rights have been put into place for intelligence community government employees since that time, and I'll go into what that law is, but not for contractors. That continues to be a huge gap for individuals such as Snowden, which I'll go into further. But just to back it up one step, and to acknowledge over the last 8 years, I counted how many laws have been passed that include best practice whistleblower provisions or whistleblower laws themselves, and there have been more than 10, which is really exciting in our opinion. And I speak here both with the Government Accountability Project as well as part of the Make It Safe Coalition, which is a network of more than 75 organizations committed to passing whistleblower laws. And we do it through the public support as well as Congress. So what's so exciting to us has been, this is really one of the biggest bipartisan issues that we feel has taken place throughout Congress. And not only do we see that through the track record and the number of laws passing, but also most recently through the establishment of whistleblower caucuses. Earlier this Congress, in the Senate, Senator Grassley and Wyden introduced the Senate Whistleblower Caucus, which has been completely bipartisan and now has 14 members. And then we saw the House follow in its footsteps just earlier this year through the leadership of Congresswoman Rice, Congressman Kaufman, as well as Representative Jackie Spear and Representative Blum. So it's completely bipartisan as well, and I think we have them to thank in large part for helping to move bills forward. So let's get into the exciting stuff. What has passed? Just really briefly, and then because I want to save time for current campaigns and what we have ahead. We've seen that within a lot of remedial legislation, so the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act, the Dodd-Frank reform, healthcare, a lot of these bills, they've all included whistleblower provisions. And we found that this is becoming more common because they're one of the most effective enforcement tools. You need to make sure that the frontline employees who are in charge of ensuring the laws are implemented, that they have rights to come forward if there is a violation of the statute. And you do that best through whistleblower provisions. So we've seen a lot of progress in that area, but just to go through a quick timeline. So in 2008, we saw the first rights enacted for intelligence community contractor whistleblowers, and that was through the NDAA for fiscal year 2008. And it was actually part of a pilot program for all DoD contractors, and within it, it covered NSA contractors as well as CIA, DIA contractors, and other employees who were within the DoD. And it was just a pilot program granted, but it had things like access to a jury. So if you were a contractor at that time within the NSA and you blew the whistle and you were retaliated against, you could arguably go through that channel and be protected. Now let's move forward to 2012, again, when the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act was passed, and that was the bill that creates rights for all, strengthened rights for all federal whistleblowers. It did not include protections for contractors or for intelligence community federal employees. So that was a big, in our opinion, loophole within that law. However, it did make really significant improvements to the Whistleblower Protection Act. It overturned a lot of the administrative loopholes, It broke the monopoly on appeal rights, and it also created a requirement for a study to determine whether federal employees should have access to a jury to challenge retaliation. So that was very exciting, but as the congressman noted, there's still more to be done in that area. So then let's fast forward in 2012 to passage of the NDAA for fiscal year 2013, and this is where it gets really interesting. They took a step forward and a step backwards. When we look at the pilot program that was passed in the NDAA for 2007, that did again include rights for individuals such as Edward Snowden. However, come 2012, just really, I'm going to try to put this into a nutshell. Senator McCaskill introduces a bill to make those rights permanent, so they won't just be a pilot program. And she says we shouldn't limit them to the DoD and DoD contractor intelligence employees. We should extend them to all of the federal government, which sounds like a great idea, right? Why not? They're one of the most effective tools to expose waste, fraud, and abuse, and the pilot program is working. So that passes the Senate, and then it gets over to the House. And HPSC gets its hands on the bill and puts a sequential referral on it and states, if you pass this as is with the coverage of intelligence community employees, we're going to keep a sequential referral on it. It will not move forward. So obviously, we were all in a really difficult position, and what ended up being the compromise within Congress was we will move that bill forward. We will create this pilot program for all government contractors, and we will make the DoD contractor program permanent. But we will remove all intelligence community contractor coverage, leaving individuals such as Edward Snowden out in the dark with no rights, were they to use proper channels to blow the whistle. And I think that point is really important because there has been an immense amount of misinformation and lack of education around what rights did and did not exist when he chose to come forward. And Mr. Snowden has explained himself that he saw what happened to the employees that did come forward before him within the federal government, such as Tom Drake and Bill Binney and others, to expose surveillance. And they were criminally investigated and prosecuted, notably Tom Drake under the Espionage Act, in the process, even though they only worked through legal channels to blow the whistle. I think that, as we understand it, informed a lot of his decisions moving forward. And again, going back to Congressman Issa's remarks, underscores the need to create safe channels for federal employees within the contractor field or within the government who want to expose violations within the intelligence community. Right now, they don't have a safe option to do that. So they're bound to go to the press or remain silent. And I'm just going to try to move it forward so we can get everything in, and then we can go into questions when Danielle's ready for that. That in 2013, obviously Congress got a lot of pushback, at least from our community, for removing rights for the IC contractors. So what they did was come back and say, okay, we're going to create some initial rights for IC government employees, not the contractors, but government employees, because they were again excluded from the larger federal whistleblower reform bill. And they did that through the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2014. And really what it does is it provides anti-reprisal rights for employees who blow the whistle internally through the IG, and through their supervisor, through the internal process. And if you're retaliated against, and the IG finds that you should be able to move forward in having your retaliation investigated, ultimately they can set up this internal appeal panel. But it's all in-house. It's all determined by the intelligence community. So it's not actually independent at this stage, but they are the first statutory rights against retaliation and for IC employees. And we think that's significant. And that was also put into law in effort to make permanent President Obama's Presidential Policy Directive 19, which he's framed as his executive order to protect IC whistleblowers. Quick note on that. At one point very early in Snowden's disclosures, he came out and said, wait, we have an executive order that covers employees like Snowden. He should have used it. Wrong. That executive order or policy directive did not cover Edward Snowden. They later came out and said, okay, one portion of it will cover contractors and it will be the security clearance portion, but that wouldn't have been adequate in his scenario. So we think that's a really important point of clarification that I'm glad to share in this setting. And then moving forward, there was just one other quick precedent that I want to highlight, happened this year, and it was through the Defend Trade Secrets Act, and that established criminal and civil immunity for whistleblowers who blow the whistle on trade secrets and make them disclose them to authorized channels. So that would be the government or their attorney when they think there has been a violation of law. And what's so significant about that act is until now we haven't had any rights within the criminal context against retaliation for whistleblowers. So we're really excited to see that precedent. And then I can hold my remarks on current campaigns if you'd like, or I can dive into them. Okay, great. As you can tell, one of them will be around restoring rights for IC contractors and government employees. Thanks so much.
Thank you. We're going to go back and do a round of quick questions with the panelists. I want to talk briefly about what's changed in Congress over the last 6 to 8 years, since there's been a lot there as well. And then we'll go to your questions. And I should just say, I want to acknowledge Alex Howard, who's the co-director of the Advisory Committee on Transparency. And I introduced myself earlier, I'm Daniel Schumann, I'm Policy Director with Demand Progress. So there has been a sea change inside Congress in terms of transparency within the legislative branch. We now have, just lately, publication of the bills, the summaries, and the status information for all legislation that happens in the House and the Senate that's available online in bulk. While that may not sound like a big deal, what it means is that it is possible for anyone to go and build tools on top of this information to help people understand what's going on. So if you want to get an alert for every time a particular phrase is mentioned, like efforts to amend FOIA, which is something that we see, you can actually get an email alert saying, oh, by the way, someone tried to sneak something in here. Or if you want to see when a hearing is going to take place in the House, you don't have to spend $1,000 a year and subscribe to a pay service to do this. It's actually now available for free on docs.house.gov and from the Senate on their website as well. There was the creation of a bulk data task force, which is a lot more exciting than the name sounds. What it means in practical terms is that all the different folks in the House who didn't talk to each other are now talking to each other. So you have the councils, you have so the people who are writing the laws, you have the people who are turning the law into the US Code, you have the different member offices, you have leadership, you have CRS, Library of Congress, GPO, and several others that I'm forgetting, and stakeholders in the public all coming in a room either once a month or once a quarter to talk about what should happen next. And this is driving additional changes. We just saw yesterday that the Library of Congress has released the congressional record going back, I think, 15 or 20 years. Now, they're releasing it as PDFs. It's not digital as data, but they are making it available in ways that haven't been made available previously. So we're and sort of the final ongoing program that's worth mentioning is something also has like a really boring name, but it's really important. It's called the Amendment Impact Program. And what it will do when it's finished is we'll show you in real time how an amendment would change a bill, and in real time how a bill would change a law. So that instead of getting, how long was the NDA? Is it this time around like 1,200 pages, 1,300? So instead of having a giant document that is basically unintelligible, unless you go through and spend a lot of time sort of lining it up against other bills and against the US Code, you will be able to hit a button and you'll be able to say, oh, this is how this amendment would change this. This is actually what it means. So that staff don't have to spend all the time trying to reconcile all this stuff, but rather they can spend their time doing what the purpose of Congress is, which is engaging in debates around the value of the changes that are being proposed. So there's a lot more coming, but there has been a lot of really good changes that's happened inside Congress. And this is really, in large part, due to the work of the Congressional Data Coalition that you've seen for Mr. Issa, Mr. Quigley, and a bunch of other members, including Democratic and Republican leadership in the House, who have reached across the aisle to actually work together. And this is one of those issues where the Speaker, the Minority Leader, the Whip, and the Majority Leader have all continuously worked together over the succession of a number of staffers over the last 8 years to change the way the House operates for the better. This is a story that isn't often told, but it is an important story. With that, I've said my 4-minute thing, so I'll stop there. Well, I'm timing it, which is why I keep looking up. So I'm just gonna go back to the panelists very quickly with a short follow-up question, and then if folks from the audience have questions, we're happy to go to that. And if not, of course, I've got many more questions as well. So Christian, if we could start, I suggested maybe we could look at what would be the next logical step for the Data Act, with application to Congress, for example. Can you talk about that a little bit in sort of what you think makes sense, in what Congress is or should be doing with respect to the data?
Sure, so it kind of breaks down into two things. One is oversight of the implementation process, and that stretches out through May 2018 when we finally get a fully published data set. And secondly, how we can utilize the information so the Data Act doesn't die as another reporting requirement. Because we have to move into that new data versus relying on those legacy systems. But first, if you don't leave here with anything else, I want you to understand this about the Data Act. The way the law is structured and the way it's being implemented, for the first time in history, we're going to be able to track at the programmatic level appropriated funds through the agency through the fiscal year, from the unobligated to the obligated accounts into the outlay, and then eventually linking up to who gets it in the procurements and the grants community. So one member we were talking to is like, wow, so if an agency comes back mid-year and asks for supplemental funds, I can go into the system and see in the middle of that fiscal year how much money they still have left, and we can instead have a conversation about repurposing that. So that's kind of, think about how that changes the relationship with Congress. But
Talk about just a touch more about how that empowers oversight. Like what will be able to happen now that couldn't happen before?
we can get more real-time access into where the funds are within the agency instead of maybe relying on agency FOIA requests sometimes.
Yes, exactly.
And getting unusable information back. There is a potential for dashboards to be created that Congress can have access to. Internal agency CFOs could use that to see how the funds are being utilized down within their own agency. And then the public as well will have access through a totally revamped USAspending.gov portal
Track
to see
corruption.
high-level information on that.
And just so for the Data Act, when it was considered, the organization I was with at the time, the Sunlight Foundation, did an analysis of it, said there was something about $1.3 trillion of misreported spending. Will this help address disparities in how funds are reported as well, so you have more certainty about the amounts? Does it get into that aspect as well?
Yes, we need to track in during the implementation, making sure the data quality is okay, or where it should be. There's a lot of agencies that are going to be reporting, some will be doing a good job, some will be doing a bad job. Once the information starts coming out after May 2017, Congress needs to start utilizing that information in the way that committees conduct oversight. When we get the budget requests from the president, when we have those hearings, we need to be citing Data Act information and calling out where that information might be wrong, so the agencies know that they need to pay attention to what they're reporting and make that a priority and move away from some of those legacy systems. We would love to see in the future for the appropriations committees to, as they report out their bills, link up how that information
Yeah, that'd be great.
And ISA deserves a lot of credit for just structuring this law in a way that really accomplished something that's a first in history, tying all the full life cycle of federal spending together. And a lot of what the Recovery Board was able to do with the stimulus funds was a kind of a proof of concept for that. Hopefully we can get there. And then Quigley has worked very hard this year on the Appropriations Committee to get into some of the committee reports, language reinstating the intent of Congress of the law, which is so critical as we go into the transition year. OMB and the new Treasury need to understand that this is a priority, so the ball really doesn't get dropped in the first months of the new administration, whoever that may be.
And I think Clinton folks, I don't know if Trump has made a statement on this, but the Clinton, the potential future Clinton administration, it's a lot of adjectives.
It's on our campaign website.
Yeah.
Has put the data out on the campaign.
Promises full.
Trump has said nothing about open data to date.
I've looked too.
So that's helpful.
So that means we will really do need to rely on our advocates in Congress, and if you're currently engaging with us, we'd love to talk to you more about that.
So Patrice, could you talk a little bit in particular about B3s and what's
Sure.
sort of going on there right now?
And first I want to revise and amend my remarks.
Okay.
I blocked out what Exemption 8 is because we have such a horrible experience with it. Exemption 8 has to do with financial institutions and reporting and regulations pertaining to them. And in a couple of go-rounds, the 2015 go-rounds with the bill, they were first blocked in the Senate, and then the Senate bill didn't come to the floor in the House because of objections from banking interests. And in the case of one agency that shall go unnamed, they told the staff that applying the presumption of openness to them meant that they would have to go line by line through their documents to see if they could withhold or release them. To which the staff replied, "You mean that's not what you're doing now, even though that's what the law requires?" So I mentally blocked what that was about. We did not get any opposition from the banks on this latest one, which is part of why it passed. I think they either weren't paying attention or gave up. So B3s, pardon? Yeah, I'm going to. For those of you who don't operate in our lingo world, a B3, there are 9 exemptions to the Freedom of Information Act, from classified information to information about wills. But the 3rd exemption has to do with exemptions that are created to the Freedom of Information Act by other statutes. And what this means, and what the real impact of this is that agencies, industries, companies go to committees other than Judiciary in the Senate or Oversight and Government Reform in the House and put in these bombshells that would blow holes in the Freedom of Information Act. And they've been able to count in past years on nobody noticing them until it was too late. Thanks to Scout that Sunlight set up and some other things, and more diligent searching and attention by congressional staff, generally we find those, or they find them, and then they reach out to us to get us to raise holy hell about them before they get passed in these must-pass bills. Current one is the National Defense Authorization Act. And in there was snuck in by the Defense Department a provision that would exempt from disclosure any information about policies and processes of the Defense Department. Some of that yes, troop movement, absolutely. Their policies and practices on sexual harassment, not so much. Their retaliation against whistleblowers, not so much. There's a whole list of things that could conceivably be under this that, because the language is so overly broad, it blows a hole, and it creates a get out of jail free, a carve out to the Freedom of Information Act for the Department of Defense. Many times these B3s create carve outs for particular agencies, or they create carve outs for particular industries. So the trucking industry tried this last year, and we spent a lot of time firefighting these. Generally, if the staff with the jurisdiction of the FOIA get knowledge of this early enough, they can firefight with the committees who have introduced them. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. If we know far enough ahead of time, we can go in with them or provide them talking points about, what's realistic, or talk to them, talk to the agencies, try to explore what is it you really are trying to protect here, and is that reasonable? And cabin that to a very limited amount of information that is carefully defined, which is what these B3s are supposed to do. But generally, they don't want to have it cabined. They really want to get this in there and create a very broad exemption. And part of this is because of a court case a few years ago that told agencies they couldn't use what were called high B2s. A B2 says that they could protect personnel practices. High B2s allowed them, and they used them to protect anything they wanted to protect. And some of it deserves protection, passwords, code words, that sort of thing. We and they need to figure out how to protect that information, but creating an overly broad exemption is not the way to do it, and we have struggled as a community to try to figure that out. So, it would be wonderful if the folks in the Transparency Caucus and other allies out there would be available to help us fight this, because sometimes it's, the usual suspects in the openness community trying to raise holy hell, and sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't, and so far it's not working on the NDAA provision. Although we're counting on the president to veto the bill for other reasons, so is that enough?
That's perfect.
Okay?
And Shannon, would you just do a little bit on what we should see?
Yes,
I know
okay,
there's a lot, but.
real quick. So current laws, the contractor pilot program, or current campaigns. The contractor pilot program that we refer to that covers all government contractors and provides whistleblower protections is potentially going to be codified, made permanent through legislation that passed in the Senate and is being UC'd in the House right now. So that's really exciting. That would make permanent best practice rates for all government contractors except intelligence community contractors. And that raises another bill that we've been trying to get to move this Congress, and that's the contractor bill to cover intelligence community contractors. It was introduced by Senator McCaskill, and she had some support in the Senate, but it's right now in the hands of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and we haven't been able to get it cleared on that end, get it over to the House. What this would do is essentially restore the pre-existing rights for intelligence community contractors so that individuals such as Snowden had options to work through proper channels to report illegal government activity or unconstitutional government activity. And it would not create immunity for individuals who publicly disclose classified information. It would create an alternative, which they don't have right now. So we think it's really important and also reasonable, but we're unfortunately not likely to see that bill move this Congress, so we'll be working on it a lot next Congress. Other ones just to highlight, we have several bills in the works that have gotten through at least one chamber and are moving in the other. That includes updating military whistleblower rights through the NDAA, very important and exciting.
Sorry, we're hoping for it.
Well, no, we know it's probably going to be vetoed regardless. Then it'll come back and we'll see what happens. Another area is for FBI whistleblower employees. That's cleared in the Senate, just cleared in the House Committee and the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and we're seeing it move forward, so we're really excited about that. It would essentially create parity with the federal whistleblower bill, which needs to happen. Other quick areas, VA legislation. Both in the Senate and House, there are a lot of VA reform bills. Almost all of them include a whistleblower provision, which is necessary because whistleblower retaliation within that agency is absolutely rampant. It accounts for about 40% of all of the federal whistleblower cases being seen by the agency that processes them at this time. So really excited about strong protections in that area. However, we do have concerns with some of the vehicles that they're being added to, or some of the larger reform bills they're being added to, because those bills, such as the most recent one, the VA Accountability First and Appeals Modernization Act in the House, does a lot of good for VA whistleblowers, but at the same time it creates almost an at-will system for employees who aren't categorized as whistleblowers. And that can be used to backfire for whistleblowers who could then be accused of retaliation and have to go through this other process. So that's kind of a complicated area, but we're glad to see the whistleblower provisions moving forward. Other quick area to highlight would be financial whistleblower protections through the Whistleblower Augmented Reward and Non-Retaliation Act, also known as the Warren Act. That's been introduced in both chambers, and we're very glad to see that. And I think I'll leave it there for now. Our next biggest campaign, I think the following Congress, will be expanding on the precedent that we got through the Defend Trade Secrets Act to make sure that employees are protected not only against workplace retaliation such as termination, but also against criminal retaliation when they engage in legally protected activity. It's really ironic that right now you can be criminally prosecuted, but you can't be fired for engaging in certain protected activity. And that's because there are no rights for whistleblowers in the criminal sphere, with the exception of that milestone that we got most recently. So that's going to be a big campaign moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want everyone to be thinking about questions. I'm going to say just 30 seconds on looking forward for the House. There is an effort afoot. 33 organizations have banded together to make recommendations for how the House should change its rules to strengthen oversight of the intelligence community, reforming the way HIPC itself functions, empowering all the committees of Congress and all the members of Congress to be able to do the work they need to do, and to come back and look at the operations of the House itself. This is a bipartisan group. There's also a white paper that accompanies it, which is even more exciting than the letter.
And can I throw in a
Yes,
comment?
yeah.
At a ethos and something of the intelligence community event yesterday, people on the panel on oversight and transparency were talking up the need for exactly those sorts of changes.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
And this is everything from making sure that members of the House Intelligence Committee have a personal staffer, a staffer that is personally responsible to them, that serves on the Intelligence Committee, just like the Senate has, so that when members are trying to do something, they don't have to rely only on committee staff, but they actually can do their own investigations a little bit on their own in the way that you have on the Senate side. Things like making sure that all members have, when the president sends a letter to the House, that all members of the House actually get that letter and doesn't get held up by HIPC, which has happened historically. Or when members of the House go to speak on the floor, that they don't get threatened with ethics violations for talking about matters that are of public interest. To make sure that, I'm sorry, I'm reacting to the audience. This actually happened.
Well, no, it should, wait. A member talks on the floor about something that's classified, that they're not authorized.
No, it was already publicly, so it was reported, it was something that was reported in The Guardian, and the member was referencing what was reported in The Guardian. The material itself was classified, but it was also in the public space. So there's an interesting question about whether members can talk about things that are on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post and talk about what's been printed there on the floor. Whether that creates problems for them in doing so. We also run into circumstances where websites, like for Congress's research arm, have been blocked. So they're simply not allowed to access certain websites because they may contain classified information as well, which tends not to be so good when that same agency is asked to report to Congress about what might happen to be on that website in the first place. There's also issues about individual member offices not having staff with sufficient clearance to be able to ask questions they need to be able to ask, and about the other committees of jurisdiction being able to get access to information that they would need as well. HIPC tends to not want to share even with other committees of jurisdiction, and that creates a lot of intramural fighting. So these recommendations are out there. They're focused around January 5th, HRS 5, the bill that will control the way the House operates in the next Congress. So I guess that was more than 30 seconds, but I'll take the moderator's privilege. And with that, are there questions from the audience? So Mike.
So what's the prognosis for, the Rules Committee is holding a hearing now on the rules package, so is there anything being proposed to follow up on these reforms, or? There
are sort of two levels of conversations taking place now. One is inside the Republican conference and the Democratic caucus about their own rules, and there's a second conversation that's happening simultaneously and slightly sequentially about what the rules of the chamber should be as well. When the chairman of HIPC testified actually about changing the overall structure of the House of Representatives itself, basically eliminating appropriations committees and merging them with authorizing committees at the hearing that took place last week, acknowledging that there seems to be a real disconnect between between those committees that have oversight duties and those that have appropriations duties. So there is definitely conversations around looking at the overall structure. There's also been a number of meetings with leadership in other offices that we and others have been doing about how these rules would change. But based on, I've been working with the House to change the rules for the last 6 years, and they often are sort of subterranean and they just sort of pop up. What I expect is that probably a couple of these will make it through and the vast majority won't. Some of them are really painfully obvious, stupid stuff, like if you're going to have a hearing or a markup, you need to tell folks that you're doing this, even though you're a select committee, just the way that standing committees do. So there's really a bunch of low-hanging fruit that nobody can object to. Well, nobody can reasonably object to, I guess. As well as things that are much harder, like changing the composition of HPSI, which is something that we recommend. Very hard to do. Even though we see now HPSI is operating, for example, without a member of the Judiciary Committee, as is currently required by House rules. So maybe there will be some movement in terms of moving it more into line with the general operations of the House, and making sure that its members are able to do what they need to do. There was a letter that came from all the Democratic members of HPSI, with the exception of the ranking member, that called for them to have their own staff that are not chosen by the chair or ranking member. That was a letter that Jackie Spears' office originated, and all the Democratic members but the ranking member signed on to. So there has been discussion of that and how that would work and what that would look like and what the costs are. I can't tell you where that is because they don't invite me to those meetings. But it seems like there is at least some discussion of the way these sort of recommendations would fit in there. And I should acknowledge Mr. Quigley is one of the members that signed on to that letter as well, as someone who serves on the House Intelligence Committee. Other questions? Alex?
In terms of rules, something maybe simple but topical. Some like you have been advocates for allowing congressional representatives to tweet in the past. What's the stance of the panel with respect to letting members use live streaming applications from their phones on the floor? Is that serve the interest of transparency or not? And in a broader context, I don't think you all talked about the National Open Government Plan. The future of the Open Government Directive, which will continue to be in force up until the next president writes it off the books. Can you talk about what that order is, what effects it's had or has not had, how agencies are complying or not with it, and what the future of our participation in the Open Government Partnership is, or should be?
Well, that's a big question.
I mean, how should Congress be involved? There was, for people who are not aware, the White House just updated the nation on progress on this National Plan on Open Government, which contains 45 commitments that go far beyond what Congress has mandated and have made significant progress on it. Oversight would certainly seem to be relevant, but what can you tell us about that?
So before we start, I'm going to look to our staff. Just how are we for time?
We're right at, at 14 or 1500, sorry, 3 o'clock.
And you need the room just about at 3?
We have about 10 to 15 more minutes.
Okay.
So
we barely have enough time.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we could get to it.
And anyone
get
in the
Josh's?
offices can.
Yeah, and there was
Josh had a
if there's one more question in the mix, would you mind, please? You had a question as well, yes.
I was curious what you guys thought about an issue that came up repeatedly during the various Clinton email hearings that the Congress has had, which is state was complaining that they don't have the same way to essentially exclude certain records from FOIA that the Defense Department and Intelligence, but I might be mistaken about the other agencies, do, because those other agencies have some kind of language that allows them to place foreign government information beyond the reach of FOIA without classifying it. And state says they've been asking for such a power for many years, and I'm just
missed
curious
that.
what you guys think about whether it would be problematic. They kind of claim that it would just be coextensive with what they now do with retroactive classification, but I guess there's always a possibility if it's easier for them to do, they might do more of it. So.
And are there any other questions we want to throw into the mix? We'll just add one more and then we'll mix it up.
Legislative transparency, Rafael DeGennaro, who started Read the Bill back 10 years ago exactly. I really commend Dan, you and everybody who has just stuck with it year after year after year and achieved these technological tools. It's marvelous and it really is commendable, people working together. Nonetheless, at the end of every year, Congress passes these shameful and dangerous omnibus appropriations bills. There's a difference between having the tool and using it. I consider this one of the most dangerous things for our democracy. Both parties are bought into it. Is anything happening in terms of changing the rules or culture and practice in the House to end this very dangerous practice?
Excellent. Okay, so
Want to start
Everyone
with
can
that
start
one?
taking,
Yeah.
Christian, you wanna start taking us through and we'll go through, so we had OGP, 4 live stream, State Department records, legislative transparency and appropriations. That, I think and there was like a 6th part of,
OGD too.
oh, OGD as well.
OGP and OGD.
Okay.
Two separate.
Okay.
And you have 10 minutes.
Yeah,
So-
and the open government.
You don't have to go through, just pick 1 or 2 if there's.
Open government plans and the omnibus issue, but the open government plans, we definitely want to see it into all the agency plans and commitment to the Data Act implementation. And that needs broad buy-in within the whole agencies, but also just the agencies need to recognize the difference between like an app that just republishes information they already have, and also this issue of availability versus accessibility. The data is not put out there in a way that can be utilized by another machine. It's not portable if you can't aggregate, if you can't do anything with it. Really, what is the point there? So that's where we're trying to encourage agencies to go. So that like machine readable by default, semantically structured information really helps. This is more personal opinion on the omnibus problem. I think pulled a lot of the bill drafting power out of the committee structures and into kind of a leadership initiative that enables these kind of last minute showdowns. And I'd like to see re-empowerment of the committee chairs to have that be where the issues are settled within the committee's jurisdiction. We could talk for hours about that. It gets more political than policy. And then I guess personally on tweeting from the floor, I'm kind of old-fashioned, and I like to see just that decorum maintained where we force members to interact through the process of the floor versus being able to comment and create more noise around it that distracts from whoever is holding the time. So.
Even though I work on open government issues, I tend to agree with you on the tweeting from the floor.
I asked about live streaming. Tweeting is established.
Oh, really? They can? Yeah, live streaming.
They do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, live streaming, if they're just streaming what's going on the floor, I don't see that that's an issue. I think that's a distinction that's not very meaningful. But I haven't really looked into it. I know both Shannon and I probably have ideas on the Open Government Directive and the Open Government Partnership. I think the directive should continue. I think it's honored more in the breach than in the process of actually doing it, although some agencies are very much better than others, and OMB is one of the worst. But I think it imposes a discipline on the agencies, and I think it needs to be revisited and reinvigorated, and they have put out new guidance finally this year. OGP, I don't know, I'm underwhelmed with where our government has gone with the national action plans. They're low-hanging fruit. They're not even low-hanging fruit, there's fruit on the ground. There are things that they've already done that they want to get credit for. I don't think they push themselves. I don't think they stretch themselves. Civil society has created, we had discussions on the first plan. On the second and third plans, we created civil society model commitments, which were enormously detailed, but provided lots of ideas for things that they could do. They mostly ignored those. So I'm ambivalent at best about the Open Government Partnership. I thought that FORN was essentially confidential information. I think that's the way that confidential information years and years and years ago when I worked for the National Archives in the Carter presidential project. Anything that was between our government and another government, or it had to do with a foreign government, was marked confidential, which is the lowest level of, there are higher levels, but I missed all this in the, I wasn't paying enough close enough attention to the reporting, obviously. I don't think I think I would want to rein that in rather than expand its use. I think they should actually have to either classify it or deal with it in some way, either get regulatory language publicly commented on that would allow them to do something and to create a protected but unclassified category for it. But no, I wouldn't want to see that expanded to them or to anybody. Over to you.
Just real quick, I'll give my feedback on the open government plan and the directive. We've seen, at least within the whistleblower-oriented commitments, there's been a lot of overlap between those two. So one is, folks who aren't in the weeds on this, one is the federal government's really directive to all the agencies on what they're supposed to do, and then the other, because you can correct me, is the agency's actual plans that they implement.
Yes.
And for whistleblowing, it's been really valuable insofar as it's focused on education around existing rights and training on those rights for federal employees and managers, which has, has great benefit. But again, as Patrice said, in a lot of cases, these plans are taking credit for what's already done. So this is already required that you go through these trainings. It's just, it hasn't received the amount of attention that it deserves, and now through the plans it's been spotlighted, so we're glad to see that, but there's no enforcement to these new mandates, and that is I think a handicap of it, that if it is effective moving forward and is, I think, worth the time and energy that civil society's put into it, we're going to need to see more of a return. And Alex just did something really helpful, which was to see how many agencies have actually posted their plans by the required date. And maybe you could just speak to that real briefly. It was about half you had found?
So I used shorthand of the 15 cabinet level agencies. The White House OMB directed them to post plans under the Open Government Directive. They're required every 2 years. Theoretically, that has the force of law coming from the president, so they're supposed to do it. OMB tells people to do things all the time, they don't do. In this case, half of the cabinet level agencies did not have a plan up by Thursday. After we highlighted that, Commerce put one up, and now Energy has put one up. That includes some pretty interesting new ideas in it. The one that we certainly would like Congress to pay the most attention to, however, is the